Hey everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft Legion beta video. Lead PvP designer Brian Halinka recently posted a dev water cooler regarding PvP gear, but this is a topic that really does affect everyone in Legion due to how the gearing is going to work. If you are a PvP player, you might be compelled to dip your toes into PvE content, and if you're a PvE player, you might be compelled to get into PvP content. First of all though, let's get through the content of Brian's post. His overall post was about the gear involved in the PvP system of Legion, because that is something that had people a little bit confused since BlizzCon. So, item level matters to a very small degree in Legion. In all queued PvP content, characters have a set statistic profile, which is scaled up or down based on their item level. Every item level past 800 will increase your stat by 0.1% in PvP content, so a player with item level 850 will have 5% more stats than a player in item level 800. This is a massive change from Warlords of Draenor, where a 100 item level difference equated to 100% roughly more player power rather than the 10% we see in Legion. Now that is according to the devs, but I think it does stand to experience. But what about the gear itself? What makes the gear that you get from PvP, well, PvP gear? The answer is nothing. In the past, they tried PvP power, they tried resilience, and more recently, they tried gear having separate item levels for PvE and PvP content. In Legion, all gear is the same. The concept of PvP gear does not exist. Sure, you get gear from PvP, but a bit of item level 820 PvP gear is no different from a bit of item level 820 PvE gear. Gear is gear, the only thing that matters is its stats and its item level. But not for PvP, because you're using a preset stat profile that is balanced for your spec. Now, when gearing for Legion PvP, your overall goal is to increase your average item level so that you get as much out of this scaling system as you possibly can. Now let's move on to how you actually get this gear. I expect this is the bit of the video that's going to raise some eyebrows. In short, you are given gear randomly, and you are only given gear randomly from PvP content. Each PvP bracket has a weekly reward for winning a number of matches. That weekly reward is a piece of random PvP gear, and anytime you get one of these bits of PvP gear, it has a chance to proc to a higher item level, just like almost all Legion gear that I've seen so far. There is no deterministic way of slowly but steadily getting gear through PvP. It is all through this random system. They do have a system in place to prevent you from getting duplicate items though, and that certainly is quite welcome. So after a very shaky response from Warlords of Draenor's PvP gearing, it's certainly interesting that they've decided to double down on randomness in gear. Their reasoning is that currency-based gearing is boring, whereas randomness allows for greater moments of disappointment and exciting, such that it's more, tense. Okay, right, great. Well, I do agree about random elements being able to deliver more excitement and more disappointment, so that you've kind of got like a player interest curve that's a little bit more varied. Now, most reward systems employ this to give players a really rare chance of something that's super exciting by adding a form of randomness on top of loot that is already predictable. Take a Hearthstone pack for an example. You can get an epic, or a legendary, or a golden card, or an Overwatch loot box where you can get a legendary skin or an epic skin. Hell, even think about the bags that you would get from the ICC weekly quest back in the day. I'm pretty sure it had a super rare chance of a bit of gear, but would normally give you like badges of frost or that special Saronite stuff. So that loot bag really did feel like a loot bag, because you could get some pretty cool stuff in it, but it was more of a cherry on top to the other more important gearing systems. Now that said, there is something really important that I don't think we talk about enough. When you compare the PvP gameplay and PvE gameplay, what you notice is that every boss you kill in PvE is giving you the potential for a random bit of gear selected from a small pool of items. While PvE content has had currency systems that rewarded strong gear in the past, PvP has almost always been the most surefire in that you will always be getting the predictable best in slot gear without ever having to make a suboptimal choice, because you get X amount of conquest points per week and you know exactly how to spend them. So from a design perspective, I can see their dilemma here. Now, it is true that Legion mitigates a number of Warlords of Draenor's problems when it comes to this stuff. You won't be worried about getting perfectly itemized bits of gear, since that won't matter. Remember that all PvP, or in PvP content, all classes use a preset stat template. When talking about this system, we also need to keep in mind that it is only about increasing one's item level, and honestly, item level means far less than it used to in PvP content because of the scaling system. Plus, everyone is using their artifact weapon, which further simplifies matters. Now, since gear is just gear, and any gear is good for almost any form of gameplay, we can't discuss the PvP gearing system without thinking about the PvE gearing system. Gear from dungeons, raids, and world quests is all good for PvP, and likewise PvP gear is all good for your player versus environment content. Well, what does all of this mean? My read of the situation is that players of all playstyles will get a basic set of item level 800 to 815 gear at the start of the expansion, your basic expansion blue quality gear, and that past that, it's just about repeating content to try to get that gear to proc to a higher item level. I know that if you're doing, say, a mythic dungeon, you'll have a better chance of getting a higher item level, but on a fundamental level, it's about re-rolling those dice on a daily or weekly basis to try to increase that item level. Indeed, on any given day, you can get from 2 to 5 bits of gear via world content, and that stuff can proc all the way up, allegedly, to a very high item level. So Blizzard's entire gear plan seems to hinge on making it, well, essentially one large Skinner box we are incentivized to repeat content for a chance of a better reward. But World of Warcraft has always done that to a degree. Right now, it's a more pronounced and granular system though. By having rewards be so granular, they really do manage to extend the duration of the system. Here's a quick thought experiment to illustrate that for you. You flip a coin twice. The first coin flip is to see whether you win the item, and the second coin flip is to see if that item is item level 800 or item level 900, and you can perform this once per week. Now let's contrast this with a similar but different experiment. You flip a coin, just like last time, to see if you win the item. After that, you roll a magical 100-sided dice. Rolling the dice determines the item level of the bit of gear that you get from 800 to 900, anywhere in between. So in the first example there, the first experiment where it was just you flip a coin to see if you win, and you flip a coin to see if you get either item level A or item level B, it allows for you to win very simply, very clearly. The second example though makes winning far less definite, and overall makes it a harder and longer process. This is further compounded by the fact that in this experiment Blizzard are using a weighted dice. You are far less likely to get a high item level bit of gear as you are to get one of the lower item level bits of gear. In the same way that with mythic dungeons right now in the game, it's far less likely that you'll proc an extremely high item level and far more likely that you'll proc the default item level. So overall, as I said, the way they're doing it makes it harder to win, and it makes winning a longer process. So look, I think that as a developer you do need to do a little bit of this stuff and distribute the gear over a period of time, but doing too much of that and putting too many sort of bolted on ancillary systems can lead to player apathy with the system, and I worry about that across the board when it comes to Legion's gearing. Getting back on topic with the PvE and PvP gear, if you're a PvP player who wants to get gear as fast as possible, then yeah, you will be expected to do other bits of content in Legion, and likewise, if you are a PvE player, then spending a few hours doing PvP content does seem like a very efficient way to get gear. Is this good overall for the game? Well, I think for the average casual player, it's not really a big problem. There are, however, potential issues for the super dedicated players for either form of gameplay who take it very seriously. Now, the developers mentioned that by having the PvP gear be random in the way that we've described, and with the power scaling system for PvP content, they were able to offer more powerful gear from PvP content, because the item level means far less in PvP, so you can give it a higher item level so that that gear is competitive with other bits of gear in the game, such as that from raids. Now, what this means is that PvP players will not feel gimped when they go to do dungeons and raids, which is pretty cool. Now, that's great in the face of it, but people are worried that as a PvE player, they will feel compelled to do the PvP content, which they may not want to do. Well, I suppose they are compelled to do the PvP content. It gives you more, more slots or more attempts at the slot machine that is Legion gearing. The same goes for PvP players doing PvE content, I suppose, though because of the item level scaling system, your item level isn't mega important. I mean, a 10 item level difference equates to a mere 1% throughput or, modifier on your stat template. So it only really matters a lot for PvE content, where the difference in item levels equates to a far larger gap in power between players. I think this bit of the conversation might matter less than some people are taking it to matter, though. We'll kind of have to see how that is in practice. Overall, what can we take from this? Well, Blizzard are doubling down on some of their gear systems that they experimented with in Warlords. At the same time, they have made gear matter far less in PvP due to the scaling system. I think the players will, quite simply, just get bored of gear. With games, I personally either like to win or lose, or for it to be something relatively simple. I don't want to be messed around with past them. I don't want this big grey area between winning or losing. Just make it simple, make it understandable, and then make the gameplay super fun, and that's what I'm into as far as the game design goes. There was a time in the past where I would play a slot machine like this, in-game of course, until I won. But now I'm running a company. I just don't have the time to do that. And that's really funny, because Blizzard have been trying to make the game more friendly to people who have less time to play the game because they've got jobs. They've done that by making a overextended and convoluted gearing system that just demands so much of your time on a constant basis. And that pretty much is it for the video. I think we covered a decently wide range of topics there, got a lot of stuff covered. Overall, I do think that PvP gameplay will be better in Legion due to the balance that these systems brings and the choices and stuff that comes with the PvP talent system. So I think that could be really good, as always though, and I suppose like many of my fellow sort of content creators, not the biggest fan of what Blizzard are doing from a gearing perspective, but that's where I'm going to leave it for this video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comments or hit me up on Twitter, which is the best place to get a hold of me. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.